Welcome to Modern Love Code. If you're trying to make a man miss you by pulling away or disappearing, it's time to rethink that strategy. It sounds logical on the surface, but male psychology doesn't work the way most relationship advice suggests. In fact, the more effort you put into making yourself unforgettable through distance alone, the easier it becomes for him to adjust to your absence. In this video, you'll discover why that happens. We'll explore the psychology behind emotional attachment, the science of attraction, and practical strategies that create genuine longing instead of temporary curiosity. At this moment, most women fall into one of three patterns. Some are constantly available, giving endless attention and meeting every emotional need the moment it appears. Others choose the opposite approach, acting distant and hoping the mystery will inspire pursuit. Then there are those trapped somewhere in between, trying to say the perfect thing, behave perfectly, and wondering why his enthusiasm slowly fades. Although these approaches seem different, they all share the same weakness. Every decision revolves around his reactions instead of your own emotional value. Now imagine approaching attraction from an entirely different perspective. The women who stay in a man's thoughts long after a relationship changes or even ends usually aren't masters of manipulation. They aren't following dating tricks or rehearsed scripts. They're creating something much deeper. They operate from a mindset that naturally leaves a lasting emotional impression. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly what that mindset is and how you can begin applying it naturally. Here's one truth that changes everything. Men rarely miss a woman simply because she wants to be missed. What they truly struggle to forget is the emotional experience they had with her. Those are two completely different things. Once you understand this distinction, every conversation, every interaction, and every moment together begins to carry a different kind of significance. Traditional dating advice usually focuses on tactics. Wait before replying, don't text first, be mysterious, pull away. Those ideas barely scratch the surface. What we're discussing today goes much deeper. Instead of surface-level techniques, we're looking at the psychological processes that quietly shape emotional attachment. He won't feel like he's being manipulated. He'll simply notice that life feels different when you're not around. If you're exhausted from decoding every text message, questioning his feelings, or wondering whether he ever thinks about you when you're apart, pay close attention. The goal isn't to force obsession. The goal is to create emotional experiences that his mind naturally wants to return to. Let's begin by exposing one of the biggest misconceptions in modern dating. You've probably heard the saying, "Absence makes the heart grow fonder." It sounds romantic. Unfortunately, it isn't universally true. Distance by itself doesn't automatically increase desire. In many situations, distance simply creates emotional detachment. The missing ingredient is emotional significance. Without meaningful emotional experiences beforehand, absence produces indifference rather than longing. Think about your favorite piece of music. You don't miss silence itself. You miss the emotions connected to that particular song, the memories it awakens, the feelings it creates, and the experience it gives you every time you hear it. Relationships work much the same way. The emotional state someone experiences around you becomes far more memorable than your physical presence alone. That's what creates a lasting imprint. Many women disappear hoping a man will suddenly realize her value. But if she never created a memorable emotional experience first, his brain has very little reason to keep searching for her. Her absence becomes little more than empty space. However, everything changes once you've established a powerful emotional association. Instead of searching for you as a person, his mind begins searching for the emotions he consistently experienced in your presence. And if those emotions become difficult to recreate anywhere else, that's when genuine longing begins. There's fascinating neuroscience behind this process. People often assume dopamine is released after receiving what they want. In reality, dopamine is heavily connected to anticipation. The expectation of pleasure often produces an even stronger neurological response than the reward itself. This anticipation creates desire. It keeps the brain engaged. It motivates people to seek the experience again. Many women unintentionally eliminate this process. They remain constantly available through endless texting, immediate replies, replies, continuous reassurance, and unlimited attention. Because there's never any emotional space, anticipation never has the opportunity to develop. Without anticipation, there's little emotional craving. So the real objective isn't disappearing, it's creating emotional withdrawal. Those are completely different concepts. Emotional withdrawal happens when someone has already experienced something emotionally meaningful and suddenly finds themselves wanting more of it. To understand how this works, you first need to recognize the 3 different emotional memories men often develop in relationships. The first is comfort memory. This comes from consistency, kindness, and familiarity. He feels relaxed around you. He appreciates you. He remembers you positively. But appreciation alone doesn't always create longing. The second is attraction memory. This centers around excitement, chemistry, and physical desire. While powerful, it's often limited to surface attraction. He may want your presence physically without developing a deep emotional attachment. The third form is where lasting emotional impact is created. This is identity memory. Identity memory develops when your presence helps him reconnect with qualities he values within himself. Perhaps he feels more confident around you, more creative, more adventurous, more capable, more understood, more alive. Maybe you notice strengths that other people overlook. Maybe conversations with you allow parts of his personality to emerge that rarely appear anywhere else. Once this happens, your value extends far beyond attraction. You're no longer associated only with romance. You're connected to the version of himself he enjoys becoming. That's incredibly powerful because identity is deeply connected to self-worth. When you're absent, he isn't only missing you, he's missing the emotional version of himself that seemed to exist most naturally whenever you were together. That is what separates temporary attraction from unforgettable emotional attachment. What creates lasting attraction isn't endless communication. It's meaningful emotional experiences, followed by enough space for those experiences to settle. The goal is to build emotional richness, not constant interaction. These powerful moments don't have to last for hours. Sometimes a 10-minute conversation filled with laughter, vulnerability, or genuine understanding leaves a deeper impression than an entire day of casual texting. Those are your emotional high points. After one of those moments, resist the urge to immediately recreate it. Instead, allow a period of distance. Not distance driven by coldness or manipulation, but by the simple reality that your life continues. You have responsibilities, passions, friendships, and goals that naturally occupy your attention. He becomes part of your world, not the center of it. That quieter period is incredibly important. While you're living your life, his mind begins processing the connection you shared. The emotional experience starts settling into long-term memory. Instead of constantly replacing the feeling with new conversations, you're allowing it to grow stronger. Ironically, many women fear these quieter moments because they mistake silence for disconnection. In reality, healthy space is what gives emotional moments their value. Without contrast, excitement loses its intensity. Without absence, anticipation never develops. Imagine spending an evening together that feels effortless. The conversation flows naturally. You laugh, share meaningful stories, and leave feeling emotionally connected, rather than texting him non-stop the next morning trying to keep that momentum alive. Let the experience breathe. Continue living your own life. If he reaches out, respond warmly. If he doesn't, don't rush to fill the silence. Your energy stays relaxed instead of anxious. During this period, something fascinating happens inside his mind. He begins replaying the conversation. He remembers how comfortable he felt. He smiles at something you said. He starts wondering what you're doing and when he'll experience that feeling again. Because the emotional high isn't being diluted through constant communication, its impact actually becomes stronger. Now let's talk about texting, because this is where countless women unknowingly weaken the very attraction they're trying to build. Most people treat texting as a way to eliminate silence. That's the wrong approach. Think of every message as emotional value rather than constant conversation. Each interaction should accomplish one of 3 things. It should increase anticipation. action. It should spark curiosity, or it should strengthen the positive emotional identity you've already created. If a message accomplishes none of those goals, it probably isn't necessary. Instead of sending predictable questions like, "How was your day?" try introducing something that naturally invites curiosity. For example, "I've been thinking about something you said yesterday." Then leave space. Allow him to wonder what caught your attention. Curiosity is far more engaging than constant availability. Another effective approach is reminding him of a previous moment that highlighted one of his strongest qualities. Perhaps you send a message like, "I saw something today that reminded me of that story you told about traveling. I really like how adventurous you are." Notice what's happening psychologically. You're not complimenting his appearance or his possessions. You're reinforcing a part of his identity. Those kinds of acknowledgements stay with people far longer because they affirm who they believe themselves to be. Equally important is resisting the urge to answer every message immediately. You don't need to mirror his timing. You don't need to keep every conversation alive until midnight. Sometimes it's perfectly healthy to send an engaging message, continue your day, and reply later when it naturally fits your schedule. That's not manipulation. It's evidence that your life extends beyond your phone. People instinctively value what isn't constantly available because scarcity creates appreciation. Now let's consider a situation many women worry about. What if you've already established the opposite pattern? Maybe you've always texted first. Maybe you've answered every notification within seconds. Maybe you've rearranged your schedule every time he wanted to see you. Can you change that dynamic? Absolutely. But the shift has to feel natural. The most effective approach is something I call interrupting the pattern. Rather than making one dramatic change, slowly alter the rhythm he's become accustomed to. If you've always replied within minutes, allow yourself half an hour occasionally. If you've always initiated every morning conversation, let him take that role sometimes. If you've constantly been available for plans, begin protecting time for your own priorities. These small adjustments create curiosity without creating conflict. He begins noticing that something feels different. He may not consciously identify what changed, but mentally he starts paying more attention. That renewed attention matters because attention is the first stage of emotional investment. Psychologically, this happens because certainty reduces urgency. When someone believes you'll always be available, your presence becomes predictable. Predictability often lowers perceived value. Once your availability becomes less certain, not unreliable, simply balanced, his brain begins treating your time as something worth appreciating instead of expecting. Of course, balance is essential. Don't become distant. Don't punish him for habits you helped establish. Simply become intentional. Offer your attention when it genuinely aligns with your life, rather than giving unlimited access by default. Now let's talk about breakups, because emotional withdrawal becomes especially powerful after a relationship ends. Immediately after separation, emotions often convince people to explain themselves, send another message, defend their actions, or remind their former partner what they're losing. Unfortunately, these impulses usually weaken attraction instead of rebuilding it. Instead, allow true distance, not only by avoiding messages, but by stepping completely outside his immediate awareness. No subtle social media signals, no indirect communication through mutual friends, no creating opportunities for accidental encounters. Disappear from his emotional environment. But here's what separates this approach from ordinary no-contact advice. You're not disappearing to wait. You're disappearing to evolve. Use that time to improve areas of your life that genuinely matter. Develop new skills, strengthen friendships, take care of your health, advance your career, explore experiences you've postponed, become someone even you feel excited about becoming. The psychological impact is profound. If he expected you to remain emotionally dependent while you're quietly building a fuller, happier life, that contradiction forces his mind to question everything he assumed. That uncertainty often becomes the beginning of genuine reflection. Of course, this entire process can collapse if you make avoidable mistakes. The biggest mistake is abandoning your own boundaries the moment you begin missing him. You've finally created meaningful space. He's beginning to notice your absence. Then loneliness convinces you to reach out. The message instantly changes. Instead of appearing naturally fulfilled, you communicate that the distance was only a strategy. Authentic emotional withdrawal works because it reflects reality. You truly have enough purpose, direction, and fulfillment that constant communication isn't necessary. Another common mistake is changing your personality when he finally contacts you. Don't become cold. Don't punish him. Don't pretend you don't care. Remain kind, relaxed, and emotionally balanced. Friendly, but not overeager. Interested, but never desperate. Finally, never waste your time apart obsessing over his every move. If you're constantly checking his social media, analyzing every online activity, or mentally living inside his world, you're still emotionally revolving around him, even if he doesn't know it. The women who leave the deepest impressions spend that time becoming happier, wiser, healthier, and more fulfilled. When they reconnect with someone later, their confidence isn't manufactured. It's the natural result of personal growth. And perhaps that's the biggest lesson of all. Women who inspire lasting attraction rarely wake up asking how to make someone obsessed with them. They focus on creating a life that genuinely excites them. Their attention stays on their own purpose. Their standards rise. Their happiness no longer depends on constant validation. When that becomes your mindset, everything else begins falling into place naturally. Instead of wondering how to make one man miss you, you begin creating a life that anyone would feel fortunate to share. And that quiet confidence is far more powerful than any dating strategy ever could. When you genuinely place your attention back on yourself, attraction stops feeling forced. There's no desperation, no manipulation, and no constant search for reassurance. Instead, you develop a quiet confidence that naturally draws people toward you. That's because true fulfillment is incredibly attractive. A woman who enjoys her own life, protects her peace, and doesn't depend on someone else to feel complete carries an energy that's difficult to ignore. She isn't chasing attention because her happiness already has a strong foundation. Now let's turn everything we've discussed into a practical plan you can begin using immediately. These aren't rigid rules designed to control someone else's behavior. They're principles that help you create healthier dynamics while strengthening your own confidence. The first step is changing any pattern of over-availability. If you've become someone who always replies instantly, begin slowing the pace slightly. You don't need dramatic silence. Small adjustments are enough. If you normally answer within 5 minutes, try taking 10 or 15 instead. If your instinct is to respond the moment your phone lights up, allow yourself time to finish whatever you're doing first. The goal isn't delay for the sake of delay. The goal is demonstrating that your life doesn't pause every time someone contacts you. Next comes an honest evaluation of where your emotional energy has been going. Think about the past week. How much time have you spent thinking about him, checking your phone, replaying conversations, or planning your next interaction? Now compare that with the time you've invested in your own dreams, friendships, health, hobbies, career, or personal growth. Ideally, your attention should remain centered on your own life. A healthy balance means the majority of your emotional investment belongs to you, not to someone else's approval. If that's not currently true, you've identified the most important area for change. The third step is intentionally creating memorable moments whenever you are together. Forget trying to impress him. Instead, focus on building genuine connection. Ask thoughtful questions that encourage him to reveal more of who he is. Share experiences that reflect your authentic personality. Laugh together. Create conversations that feel different from ordinary small talk. The objective is leaving him with an emotional experience rather than simply another interaction. Once you've shared one of those meaningful moments, move to the fourth step. Give it room to breathe. Allow 2 or 3 days where your attention naturally shifts back toward your own responsibilities and interests. You don't need to disappear dramatically. Simply stop feeling responsible for maintaining constant communication. Continue enjoying your own routine. If he reaches out, respond warmly. If he doesn't, remain emotionally steady. That space gives his mind an opportunity to revisit the positive emotions connected to you without those feelings becoming diluted through non-stop contact. Finally, make this a consistent lifestyle instead of a temporary technique. Continue balancing meaningful connection with healthy independence. Continue investing in your own growth. Continue protecting your time and emotional energy. Over time, this becomes less of a strategy and more of a natural way of living. Now let's address an important question. What happens if he doesn't respond the way you hoped? This is where many people become discouraged, but it actually provides valuable clarity. Not every man will react to your increased self-respect by moving closer, and that's perfectly okay. Sometimes a lack of response simply reveals that the emotional connection wasn't as strong as you believed. Sometimes it reveals a mismatch in priorities, values, or emotional availability. Neither of those realities should damage your confidence. Compatibility cannot be manufactured. Some people are drawn toward relationships that require very little effort. They prefer partners who are endlessly available because it feels comfortable and convenient. If someone loses interest the moment you establish healthy boundaries, you've learned something important. That person was benefiting from unlimited access rather than appreciating your value. The right man responds very differently. When he recognizes that your attention is meaningful rather than unlimited, he becomes more intentional. He makes plans instead of expecting you to do all the work. He becomes more present during the time you share. He appreciates your company because he understands it isn't something to be taken for granted. And that's exactly the kind of relationship worth building. Always remember the real purpose behind everything we've discussed. The objective isn't to manipulate someone into choosing you. It's to become the strongest, healthiest version of yourself. A woman who respects her own time, honors her own standards, and refuses to abandon her identity in pursuit of love. Yes, these psychological principles can make someone miss you. Yes, they can deepen emotional attraction, but their greatest value lies somewhere else. They help you reconnect with your own confidence. They remind you that your worth doesn't increase because someone finally notices you. Your worth already exists. The only thing that changes is your willingness to protect it. When you stop trying to earn someone's affection and begin choosing carefully who deserves access to your life, everything shifts. You stop chasing, you stop overthinking, you stop settling for crumbs of attention. Instead, you become someone whose presence feels valuable because it comes from authenticity rather than need. And that's the kind of woman who isn't easily forgotten, not because she tried to become unforgettable, but because she built a life so meaningful, balanced, and fulfilling that anyone fortunate enough to experience it naturally remembers what it felt like to be part of it.